In a bleak town where dust and steel smoke dictated fates, a genius was born. A place where a father's lashes carved deep-seated fear, yet forged a resilient heart. Fame blossomed early, glory arrived all too fast. Young Michael Jackson, the prodigy of Motown, lived within a magnificent glass cage, but he was alone. Then destiny knocked, a legendary partnership, an album that split the history of music in two, March 1983. The world held its breath before a king. But the summit always comes with an abyss, the changing skin, the rumors, the cruel trials. Neverland, a paradise for children, suddenly turned into a living hell. He was a king, he was a genius, but he was also a human being, torn apart between the blinding spotlights and a private, unspoken pain. To the very end of his life, he kept fighting for the music, for his children, for himself. But that heart could no longer wait. One June night in 2009, the king returned to dust. Part 1. Gary, Lashes on the Back of a Genius, 1958-1967. The history of human music was rewritten not within the walls of a lavish palace, but inside a cramped room of less than 20 square meters at 2300 Jackson Street, Gary, Indiana. It was a bleak industrial town where the future of every child was often predestined to end in the searing heat of steel foundries. On August 29, 1958, a boy named Michael Joseph Jackson was born. He was the 8th child in a family where poverty was not just a lack of material goods, but a constant threat to human dignity. His father, Joe Jackson, was the embodiment of that era's harshness, a steel mill worker with calloused hands and a heart hardened by the failures of his youth. Joe once had a small band, but his dream of changing his life through music had vanished like smoke. Consequently, he looked at his children through a different lens, not just with a father's love, but with the ruthless expectations of a manager. He transformed their tiny living room into a literal forge. Michael, only 5 years old at the time, had to learn how to stand on his toes before he could even read. While other children outside dreamed of candy or baseball games, Michael faced a brutal reality. If you are not perfect, you will be punished. Joe Jackson would often sit on a wooden chair in the middle of the room, clutching a leather belt. If Michael missed a step or his brother sang a flat note, the sound of the belt slicing through the air would echo instantly. Michael later recounted that his fear of his father was so profound that he often felt nauseous or trembled whenever Joe appeared. Yet, it was in the furnace of that fear that a perfectionist genius was forged. Michael didn't dance for joy, he danced for survival. He observed how sunlight filtered through the windows, how raindrops fell on the tin roof, and he channeled all those rhythms into his body. The Jackson 5 was born not to perform, but to conquer. That su ashuk jong, joan dan cho fandu, nai lota jok su joy laptan hok gua, an hao kwang rak rova bong toi kwasu ko jok. Jai la gyai joan mekel bat jau trothan mot san fam hoan hao trong mat kong chung, nahong lai dan jan mat bansak kan han. Doi jai la bandich tieng an chuyen gyep vakas goi itulio je ban hoan tien fan ne. Part 2, Motown, The Glass Cage and the Loneliness of a Prodigy, 1968-1975. In 1968, destiny officially knocked on the Jackson family's door. Motown Records, the prestigious hit factory of Black America, signed the Jackson 5. Berry Gordy, the titan of Motown, immediately realized that the brightest diamond wasn't the group itself, but its youngest member, Michael. The world watched in awe as a 10-year-old boy commanded the stage with the vocal power of a seasoned diva and the presence of a master. When Michael sang "I Want You Back," the audience didn't just hear a pop song, they heard the pain, the longing, and the soul of a true artist. Michael became the face of hope for the Black community in an America still deeply scarred by prejudice and segregation. However, behind the Billboard-topping hits, the glittering sequined suits, and the iconic afro, lay a terrifying loneliness. Michael was denied a normal childhood education. He studied with private tutors squeezed between recording sessions and live performances. On world tours while his brothers went out to enjoy their fame, Michael was often locked in hotel rooms for security reasons. Michael later recounted looking down at the streets from hotel balconies, watching children play and weeping uncontrollably. "I felt like a doll in a glass case," he once said. Fame, arriving far too early, had stripped away his right to be a child. Michael had no friends. His only companions were the stuffed animals he kept around him to ease his homesickness. It was this profound void that birthed a fierce desire within him. One day he would build a world of his own, a place where childhood would never end. Part 3, The Revolution of Freedom and the Destiny Called Quincy, 1976-1981. In 1976, the Jackson family made a historic decision, leaving Motown to seek creative freedom at Epic Records. It was a true gamble. But for Michael, it was a chance to escape the outdated child star image. However, the greatest turning point didn't come from a recording studio, but from a musical film set called The Wiz in 1978. There, Michael played the scarecrow longing for a brain, and destiny led him to meet Quincy Jones, a master of jazz and soul orchestration. During a break on set, Michael approached Quincy carrying a musical draft and his inherent shyness. He asked, "Mr. Jones, could you recommend a producer who could help me with a solo album?" Quincy, having witnessed Michael's absolute devotion on set, replied, "Michael, let me do it." That answer gave birth to one of the greatest collaborations in the history of world music. In 1979, Off the Wall was born. It wasn't just an album. It was the opening blast of a revolution. Michael began to showcase his signature hiccup technique and sharp gasps between lyrics, sounds that would later become his vocal trademark. The song Don't Stop Till You Get Enough brought Michael his first solo Grammy. Yet, amidst the brilliant glory, a hidden pain resurfaced. Michael looked at his own photo on the album cover and felt dissatisfied. He began to grow obsessed with his appearance. This was also the period when Michael underwent his first nose surgery following a stage fall accident. He didn't know then that this was the start of a painful and controversial journey of physical transformation. Despite its massive success, Off the Wall was undervalued by the Academy when it failed to win Album of the Year. Michael wept bitterly that night, but immediately a flame of wild ambition ignited. He declared to Quincy, "For the next album, I want every song to be a masterpiece. I want the whole world to bow down." Part 4, Thriller. When the world had only one king. If there were a milestone that divided the history of modern music in two, it would be November 1982, the day the album Thriller officially hit the shelves. Michael Jackson didn't just want to make music, he wanted to create a religion of entertainment. The recording process for Thriller was a literal ordeal. Michael and Quincy listened to thousands of demos to select the 9 perfect tracks. Let's talk about Billie Jean. The song was based on a true story about a woman who harassed Michael, claiming he was the father of one of her twins. Michael was so obsessed with the bass line of this song that he nearly got into a car accident because he was so lost in thought. Quincy Jones once wanted to shorten the intro because it was too long, but Michael was adamant. "No, that intro is what makes people want to dance immediately." And he was right. Then came the night of March 25, 1983 at the Motown 25th anniversary. Michael stepped onto the stage wearing a black fedora, a sparkling sequined jacket, and a single white glove. As the melody of Billie Jean began, the world held its breath. Michael spun, stood on his toes, and then he glided backward, the legendary Moonwalk. In due moment, Michael broke all laws of physics. Fred Astaire, Michael's idol, called him right after that night and said, "You're an angry dancer and I love it." But the revolution didn't stop with the music. Michael forever changed the concept of the music video. Before him, MTV was a television channel almost exclusively for white artists. Michael shattered that wall. The Beat It video with its street gang style, and especially the 14-minute Thriller short film with its classic zombie dance, transformed the music video into a high-value cinematic art form. Michael was now the most powerful man on the planet. He met presidents, held Guinness World Records, and was the idol of every social class. However, the summit always comes with an abyss. In 1984, while filming a commercial for Pepsi, a pyrotechnic accident caused Michael's hair to catch fire. He suffered second- and third-degree burns to his scalp. This was the dark moment that changed his life forever. To endure the excruciating pain and the constant scalp reconstructive surgeries, Michael began using painkillers. This was the seed of the sedative addiction tragedy that would claim his life 25 years later. At the same time, the first patches of vitiligo began to appear on the king's body. Part 5, Neverland, The Mask and Loneliness. At the summit, 1987-1999. When the Bad album was released in 1987, the world saw a completely different Michael Jackson. His skin was lighter and his facial features were more refined. This was also when the world became its most cruel toward him. They stopped calling him a genius and started calling him Wacko Jacko. But behind the heavy makeup and glittering costumes was a painful medical secret Michael tried to hide: vitiligo. Depigmented patches began appearing on his hands, chest, and face. Instead of letting the world see his brokenness, Michael chose to use foundation to even out his skin tone. The legendary white glove was, in fact, originally intended to conceal the first signs of pigment loss on his dancing hands. In 1988, Michael purchased the Sycamore Valley Ranch and renamed it Neverland, the land of the children who never grow up. He spent over $30 million transforming it into an earthly paradise with a movie theater, an amusement park, and a private zoo. Why would a grown man do this? The answer lay back in Gary, Indiana. Michael was trying to use wealth and fame to buy back the 10 years of childhood stolen by his father, Joe Jackson. He invited thousands of orphans and children with cancer to Neverland. He would lie on the grass with them, watch cartoons, and eat popcorn. For Michael, it was healing, but for the outside world, it was the seed of dark speculation. In 1993, the first storm struck. Allegations of child sexual abuse from the Chandler family shattered the king's image. Although later evidence suggested this was a sophisticated extortion plot, Michael's soul was permanently scarred. He began abusing powerful sedatives just to sleep, to forget the screaming crowds outside. Amidst the storm, he wrote "Man in the Mirror," a hymn of self-reflection. He stood on the 1993 Super Bowl stage, motionless for 2 minutes amidst the screams of 100,000 people, just to prove that even if the whole world turned its back, his crown still shone bright. His friendship with Elizabeth Taylor was the only pillar keeping him from collapsing. She was the only one who understood that inside the form of a superstar was a small boy trembling with fear. Part 6, the tragic ballad When the King Returns to Dust, 2000-2009. The early years of the 21st century were a bitter journey for Michael. The 2001 album, Invincible, despite high sales, became the centerpiece of a war between him and Sony Music. Michael called the corporate heads racists. He was lonelier than ever. The climax was the 2005 trial, where he faced allegations once again. Though he was acquitted on all counts, the Michael Jackson the world once knew died in spirit from that day forward. He fled America, living in seclusion in Bahrain and Ireland, searching for a peace free from camera lenses. In 2009, driven by financial pressure and a longing to prove to his children that he was still the king, Michael announced the This Is It tour. 50 shows in London sold out within hours. At age 50, with a frail body weighing barely 50 kilo, Michael trained to the point of exhaustion. He poured his sweat onto the rehearsals floor at the Staples Center, guiding dancers half his age. He told director Kenny Ortega, "We must show them something they've never seen in their lives." But that heart could not wait for opening night. In the late hours of June 24th and the early morning of June 25th, 2009, inside his Holmby Hills mansion, Michael could not sleep. He begged his personal physician, Conrad Murray, for a little milk, his nickname for the powerful anesthetic propofol. At 12:22 p.m. that day, an ambulance was called. News of Michael's death spread at the speed of light. Google, Twitter, and Wikipedia all crashed due to the massive surge in traffic. The entire planet fell into a strange state of paralysis. Michael Jackson's funeral was the largest televised event in human history, with over 2.5 billion viewers. When Paris Jackson, his young daughter, stood at the podium and said, "Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine," the whole world wept. It turned out that throughout his life, this man, dissected, judged, and shunned by the world, possessed the purest heart. Michael passed away, leaving a void in music that can never be filled, but he left behind an eternal lesson in resilience. He transformed pain into art and turned his father's lashes into moonwalk steps that glided over every sorrow. Closing words, epilogue. Now, if you look up at the night sky and see the brightest star, believe that it is Michael. He is no longer in pain, no longer besieged by medications or the tabloids. The king is truly free. Farewell, Michael, the man in the mirror, the man who taught us how to heal the world.